Hello everybody, Sky Marshal here, bringing you back Operation Dark Horizon. And we are in the review stage of turn 13. And a lot has happened this particular turn. A lot of exciting events for some nations. Others not so much. So I think we'll probably just dive in nation per nation and go around that way. That might be easier for us to follow. And what better way to do it is with the Italians. So the Africa Corps was formed this turn by the Germans. They did bring down a pile of units down here from Germany and Western Germany and also in France. And they brought in, as you can see, 3 infantry, the 15th Panzer Division with their Panzer IIs, which are light panzers, and then we also have the 21st Panzer Division with some Panzer IVs there. 2 self-propelled artillery, 1 motorized, as well as air support. They have 2 strategic bombers down here, as well as 2 Bf-109 squadrons and 2 Horten 229 jet fighters down here, as well as their Western Division to their Africa Corps. So the Germans are in force, but I know these are not the Italians, but this is just what's come to help, because the Italians took a bloody nose, but Cairo has fallen. El Alamein, Alexandria, all those wonderful coastal cities are now under Italian jurisdiction. It was a horrible battle for the Italians, but they did come through triumphant, moving troops in from Transjordan and further south down from Upper Egypt, and all they were able to take it was 1 artillery. They did lose a fighter in the battle because they brought in the Regia Aeronautica, which was 1 medium bomber, all their fighters, which I believe was 4, as well as a tactical bomber, and suffered a bit of a pounding, but nonetheless they came through there with decisive defeat on the British. However, they, like I say, did take a bit of a bleeding nose. Further south, the French came up and liberated Nubia against the Italians down there. And obviously the Italians are worried about their holdings in Italian Somaliland, so they have a strong garrison force currently right there. They did pull out a Marine here from Malta, brought them back up here to reinforce Rome and in northern Italy, and their entire fleet has fallen back. They did lose 1 destroyer. The Ascari was destroyed by French and British naval forces with Force G and Z, as well as the French battleships that have come up here to attack it, and that was the King George V that got a little bit of a torpedo hit from the destroyer torpedoes. However, though, on a bright side, I believe it was the Germans this turn. I could be wrong. It might have been the Germans. Did take 6 million tons of shipping in the Mediterranean, I think. Can't remember. So much has happened since then. But nonetheless, so that's where the Italians are. Now they've come back up in home port right now. And that's where they stay. And they're slowly licking their wounds, celebrating, I'm sure, in Rome right now, that all of this is theirs, at least for the time being. Moving on to the Free French, since we are down here anyways. Like I say, they've secured Nubia for the British. They have Abyssinia locked down. They have placed a few free foreign legions in Cameroon. But aside from that, not too much else. They have scatterings of forces up here in Gibraltar, but also over here, the French submarine Acheron went further south down into the Java Sea. And that's about the status update for the French. Now, moving on, but besides, we should acknowledge that the Richelieu and the Gascon are still alive, and they're helping the British with their exploits in the Mediterranean. Now let's move on to the Germans, just for fun. The Germans did do a sizable raiding campaign here. 3 million tons in the South Atlantic, 1 million tons here over in the eastern or western Indian Ocean. Up here, they took 11 million tons of shipping with their wolf packs up there. And they did build 2 new advanced U-boats, but one of them was hit by a British seaplane. So all what remains is U-337. So consequently right now, the German naval campaign on Britain is starving them almost into submission. Now let's roll up to the top here and see what's going on with the British home defense. And we'll see the British home defense. Well, They're moving troops all over through South England, London. They still got sizable damage in London. Not much has been done with that, but North England is still holding strong. Anti-aircraft guns galore. So there is quite a build-up here in Britain. So we'll see what the Germans have decided. They do have a sizable transport fleet, so they could mount another invasion, but a large part of their air force is, well, helping the Italians down in North Africa. Aside from that, the Prince of Wales and the Empire Chancellor, they're licking their wounds in port down south here. The American fleet did fall back with the Enterprise, and all her support vessels right here have been staying up here. Who knows what they're going to do? Obviously, they're going to probably try to do another landing, bring forces in, or maybe even try a D-Day landing here to put pressure on the British or the Germans themselves. Over here in India, following the British, well, the Russians decided to make a move into India and took Western India from them. And so the British did garrison stuff in Delhi and a few other places right now because they're obviously worried about Russian aggression. But there's not much they can do about it because they have a sizable Japanese force that they have to worry about. And Calcutta is important. The Japanese, and we'll move on to the Japanese did land in China this turn, taking Nanking and a few other territories here on the coast. Consequently, that has poised the KMT to roll back into the mountains of Yunnan. But they did decide to do an aggressive stance on Suyan, worried about the new Russian rail line from Mongolia down here, linking up and helping to fund the CCP's war effort. So obviously the Soviets are not very happy with the KMT currently right now, but we'll see what happens going into the future right now. Aside from that, the Japanese have basically consolidated their gains. We'll go down here to Australia, just for a fun fact. One territory still remains not under the Japanese banner, but I'm sure South Australia eventually will be as they round the horn there, go around and hopefully consolidate Sydney. Japanese forces, a sizable amount of forces were used in the taking of China. So they did bring up here the Japanese First Fleet, and that First Fleet is basically what you see here. So their Kidibutai, as well as their battleships, carriers, and submarines. Oh, sorry, actually, they're actually here in Palau. The Japanese first right down here is the Akaga battlecruiser, 3 heavy cruisers, and their invasion force as well. But you can see they got ships scattered all over here, and they built 3 new submarines, I-30, I-29, I-21, for home defense, as well as they still have submarines littering the Indian Ocean all the way over next to Saudi Arabia, with I-23 reaching its tentacles down there. So currently, Japan is still doing quite well, and they're garrisoning the home islands. They have their medium bomber forces protecting that and hunting submarines around their current location. So we'll see what Japan's turn happens next, and we'll see what they have up their sleeve. The Americans, since we're on this side of the map, have dispersed their submarine squadrons. The USS Gato and the Scorpion are down here by the Solomon Islands, the Coral Sea. Hammerhead and the Bonefish are close to home waters. They've put a destroyer, USS Dale, off the Line Islands. But the big story, we have now 6 Pacific fleets, 6 U.S. Pacific fleets, all lined up in Pearl Harbor, one of the largest concentrations of naval power in the history of this game. And you can see all Iowa-class battleships, Kentucky, Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, New Jersey, as well as their cruisers, their light cruisers, their destroyer escorts, and of course the big boys, Yorktown and Hornet. Yorktown's handling the torpedo squadrons with the Dauntlesses, and then the Wildcats or Hellcats are going to be on the Hornet there, preparing for the next invasion. And the Americans are following up with 2 destroyers, with 2 advanced attack transports of the Haskell class. So they have a sizable invasion force ready to pound Japan, when or if they ever do. Still waiting on that, but I guess someday that might happen, but not anytime soon. But over here, we'll look at the build queue down here. The Americans did move the 6th Iowa class, the USS Illinois, over one spot, and laid down the Saratoga and the Lexington, 2 more carriers. So they're having a sizable naval shindig over there, and Hambone is going to town with his carriers and battleships, and that's what I love to see, especially as the American player. A lot of fun that way. So that pretty much concludes the American buildup. Italians, Germans, but what have the Russians been doing? Well, let's take a look at the Russians right now. So the Russians right now have a sizable force here in Iran, in southern Iran, and currently right now, like I say, they moved and pushed into India for some fun. They also have pushed into and right up to Istanbul, and the Turks-British that have turned now have decided to go into Bulgaria and put pressure on the Germans in that area. So leaving Istanbul a walk-in for the Russians, or at least hopefully for the Russians, and giving them hopefully securing another victory point currently at this part of the game. But obviously we have to hold it until that comes, right? So right now, home defense, we have Air Force and Army forces in Transcaucasia, slowly building up for whatever happens. And the nice thing about Istanbul, it's going to hopefully be a relatively easy conquer since the city has been abandoned, which is unlike actual history. Up here in the north, the Russians are very interested on the battle with what the Germans and the British are doing, as well as the Americans. So they have put a sizable force here to see and or take advantage of whatever might happen between these two great nations. And if not, they are quite happy to defend Russian gains well into the North Atlantic right here. The Sovietsky Soyuz, the first Russian battleship, was completed last turn, which hopefully will join the Russian fleet. The battlecruiser Stalingrad, the Izmail carrier with their fighter squadrons. So they have not a bad navy, something at least to hold their own, which is important. Further down south here, since recent German builds up on the Eastern Front, well, the Russians have built up on their Western Front with infantry, troops, and upgrades in this sector. So we'll see what happens, guys, moving into turn 14. Gosh knows, we don't even know what Silk's got planned up for his sleeve, but I can only imagine that they're going to try to look at the possibility of defeating Gibraltar, securing Egypt, possibly even making another move on England. The world is their oyster right now. Matter of fact, they're doing so well, they have so much money, the Graf Zeppelin and the Hindenburg are heading to Switzerland to deposit many gold and silver reserves, no doubt from their exploits in Europe. So guys, wanted to bring you this quick little wrap up of what's going on here with this game, but I hope you're enjoying it, because this is truly, as we get closer and closer to the end, which is still many turns away, we are looking at a true Mexican standoff, and it's anybody's game, which is exciting, really exciting. So stay tuned, check out Silk's channel for the next turn, 14.1, and we will see you guys later. Stay classy.